My name is Reagan Alvarez, and this is my professional development video for Chapter 14, Human Connections. So, what is communication? Communication and languages are a crucial component of human social interactions. Our ability to communicate with others and collaborate and share ideas, history, allows for the progression of not only our culture but our society as a whole. Um, a lot of the things that we know now today comes from different forms of communication, just as like word of mouth and just things like that. So it's more like information that's acquired by one generation that can be passed down to another. Um, Language is important to humans because all certain species have a certain way to like communicating with each others. But humans are the only one that have mastered a cognitive language communication. The three regions associated with communication is the Broca's area, which is it's near the motor cortex, and it utilizes speech production, and this area of the brain regulates breathing patterns while speaking and vocalizations for normal speech patterns. The next one is the Wernicke's area. This region of the brain contains the motor neurons involved in the comprehension of speech. The next one is the auditory cortex. The auditory cortex is the human brain's way of like receiving and processing like different content such as like sounds, voices, or music. Language production and comprehension. One way we study language is by observing different like lesions on people's brains, or like where just like okay. So most of these observations have been made on people who have suffered like strokes or like different accidents or really anything that involves the brain. So the most common type of like study brain accident is any accident that's caused by a obstruction of a blood vessel. So the vessel is obstructed. This causes like an interruption of the blood flow, which deprives those certain areas of the brain that I was talking about before of blood supply, which causes that whole region to die. Um, Next, I would like to talk about certain language disorders. The one big language disorder that has been studied most in this chapter is aphasia. Aphasia is a disturbance of a disturbance of comprehension of languages caused by brain damage. They have two different types of aphasias. One is the Broca's and Wiener's different aphasias. So the Broca's aphasia is an expressive aphasia resulting in damage to the Broca's area in the left frontal lobe. Individuals with this type of disease have difficulty producing languages, specifically speech. Most people with this type of disease use ASL as a way of communication. The Wernicke's disease is more of a receptive aphasia, which is caused by damage to that area of the frontal lobe. This also affects speech comprehension, and most people who have this also uses ASL. So language is largely a lateralization function. Most language disturbances occur after the left side of the brain has ultimately been damaged or dies in a way. These circuits that are in this left side of the brain, like I said, is mostly involved in language comprehension and production, which is on the left hemisphere. The opposite hemisphere plays a role in language production, but it plays a bigger role in speech rather than language comprehension and production. So it's important. The importance of lateralization in the brain has also been revealed with certain studies called the split brain operation. It's a surgical procedure done. It's involved with severing the corpus callosum part of the brain, and which is largely isolated in the cerebral hemisphere. Split brain operation. This was the surgery I just previously talked about. Um, this operation sometimes is used to treat things like severe seizure disorders or something along that nature. And this operation, what happens in this operation is that the neurons are on one side of the brain becomes uncontrollably like overactive, and this overactivity is transmitted to the other side of the brain by the corpus callosum. And this is not a good thing. This is why the split brain operation needs to take place, because those neurons aren't supposed to be crossing over, like crossing hemispheres. They're supposed to stay on one, and they're not supposed to be overactive. So after this operation is performed, the two hemispheres are disconnected based on the operation. So this means that those sensory mechanisms such as memory and motor systems can no longer exchange that information, which kind of causes the neurons on that one side to calm down in a way, so they're not overly active, like overly stimulated after the operation. Um, in regards to language and reading comprehension, language comprehension is more like the ability to understand the different elements of spoken and written languages, like the meaning of words and how words are put together to form sentences. This is also like one of the building blocks of reading comprehension. So you can't have language comprehension and like you have to first have language comprehension and then move on to reading comprehension. Um, we're going to talk more about language disorders. Like I said before, aphasia is the loss of the ability to understand speech and communication using language. It can occur when areas of the brains that are responsible for these type of interactions and these language abilities become damaged. Like we said before, there are several types of aphasia, but each type they're categorized as either fluent or non-fluent. And the type that we talked about before, the Broca's aphasia type, is a non-fluent category. So symptoms of this disease would be poor to absent grammar, difficulty forming words, like difficulties forming complete sentences, and like omitting certain words such as like the, and, is. A person who has this disease might say something like cup now, like cup me, instead of saying like a full complete sentence like I would like the cup or I want the cup. They will shorten it because they're not able to form those certain words because of the due to lack of oxygen and blood to that part of the brain. Um, and any neurological condition that results in in damaged cells of that language area may result in aphasia. So when the brain cells die due to lack of blood and oxygen flow, and that brain cell stops, then aphasia is like bound to happen. Back to reading comprehension and development. So reading comprehension involves two different types of processes. It involves a whole world reading process or a phonic reading process. So a whole world reading process is when like you see a familiar word that you can recognize and pronounce. And phonic reading is like used for unfamiliar words that requires like a recognition of like different letters or a knowledge beforehand of how the word may sound or the sounds that they make. So I hope everybody enjoyed my presentation. This was just a brief overview of chapter 14, dealing with human connections and like the different parts of the brain and how language is, used, learned, informed, and then after language, how reading is used and comprehended within psychology.